when the FBI walks right into the belly of the beast, not to arrest someone, but to see how the scam machine actually works. Retired FBI agent Scott Augenbaum joins us today. He didn't read about the Cambodian scam centers and what's going on over in the Pacific Rim in some report. He stood inside them, recently back from the Pacific Rim, and what he saw will shock you. A $15 billion criminal empire hiding in plain sight, on beautiful beaches, inside casinos, in what looks like luxury high-rises downtown Manhattan. But here's what shocked us the most. Scott came face to face with forced labor camps, and looking closer found compounds that make these beautiful buildings more in focus. They were jail cells. Hiding in plain sight, over 200,000 people trapped through human trafficking, placed into forced labor, working 16-hour shifts with cattle prods to their necks. Texting your grandma about that investment opportunity. Today we pull back the curtain and discuss what's really happening, why your money's never coming back, and how this is all completely preventable. This is Cybercrime Junkies. You won't want to miss this. And now, the show. Well, okay. Welcome, everybody, to Cybercrime Junkies, a very special episode today. We are joined by the legendary Sir Scott Augenbaum, former FBI head of cybercrime division supervisor, who recently returned from Cambodia and the Pacific Rim, investigating and looking into a lot of the scam sites, which we're really interested in discussing. Joining us is Dr. Sergio Sanchez. Thank you for joining, gentlemen.
So I want to ask both you guys a question, because before I got sucked into this world, here I was, it was around Thanksgiving. I just came back from Jordan. That was another crazy, and I said to myself, 2026, I'm going to focus on putting my passion in front of profit. I've just got rid of a lot of bad business deals, a lot of things.
Good.
And I said, I want to keep 1 million people safe.
Yes.
And then the next thing
I saw that.
And the way the universe works, all of a sudden, the State Department calls me up because I have a good friend of mine who couldn't do this trip, who's a retired FBI agent, MK, and he hooked me up. And they said, would you be willing to go out to Cambodia to talk to local law enforcement, work with the FBI on cybercrime prevention, and then go to Jakarta to be part of a State Department conference? And I said, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But I had no idea what the heck was going on in Cambodia. And I know there are a couple of people who talk about it. I barely listen. We talk about humanitarian crises. But I want you guys to imagine for a second that you walk into a place on the beach. It's beautiful, beautiful beaches, and all around you are casinos. And inside those casinos are actually people scamming U.S. citizens and people around the world. And last year it was reported that it was $15 billion worth of scam.
Yeah.
And
I did a bunch of research before we got together, and the magnitude of it is absolutely shocking.
So boom, I get on there and I'm out there. I really have no idea what I'm getting into, but I know that I'm going under the invitation of the State Department. I'm working with the FBI. So I go, hey, what could go wrong? And nothing went wrong. And that's what I want to share with you guys today, is a little bit about how, as a retired FBI agent, this completely caught me off guard on what was going on out there. And I like to say that I have my finger on the pulse of organized crime to a point. Since I retired, we talk about the Chinese organized crime, we talk about Russian organized crime, we talk about Nigerian organized crime, but it completely blindsided me on the scope and the magnitude of this issue. Wow.
And thank you for doing that. And thank you for clarifying these things. One question I have is, These are the people in the groups that are texting us, that are calling, that are doing romance scams and all of those things, as I understand it. And they themselves are victims.
Let me give you guys on how this came together because I was completely unaware. So here I am, I'm with my guide with the State Department. We're driving out to, there's a place called Chinookville, Cambodia. 2018, right before I was retiring from the FBI, and I'm not paying attention to this because, China bans online gambling. Okay. All right. And
Okay.
Sergio, you're probably aware of that. And okay, who cares?
Yeah.
So Chinese investment starts building these casinos over on the west coast of Cambodia, which is a port city, which is a very, very easy flight from China. And they start building all Chinese business comes in and builds casinos. Now, Cambodia is moving up there, but Cambodia has had a very rough history. Cambodia is a monarchy. They've had their problems with the Khmer Rouge. I mean, there was a genocide there, 300,000 people are killed. So all of a sudden, you start getting economic investment from Chinese businesses building casinos in Cambodia. And that's kind of a boom for the economy.
Sure.
And I think you guys realize it because for every one of these high rise buildings, and I sent you a bunch of pictures of some of these things. I mean, we got some really beautiful, beautiful buildings. Now, what are they using? Construction material, energy, food. It starts bringing in a lot of economic activity into the region. 2020, what ends up happening? COVID shuts everything down. And in that part of the world, it's really bad. I don't think there was travel for quite some time. So you had all these casinos sitting empty and sitting vacant. But these casinos weren't like operated like Harrah's or the US casinos. These casinos are tied to organized crime. Now, organized crime has one goal, and that's to make money. So they shifted that together and they went over and they started using those as scam centers. And they started turning the casinos into these scam operations. Now, time is going by.
Well, and the statistics are shocking.
Oh,
Like Cambodia recently shut down 200 scam centers in a recent crackdown. The years before that, there were at least 300.
so now organized crime does what organized crime does best. They start to make money on these scams. And about 2022, about 3 years ago, that's when we start seeing the pig butchering scams. We start dealing with the cryptocurrency romance scams. And here we are a couple of years later, and it's exploded. And now we have a perfection of organized crime. This is a complete living, breathing infrastructure that is taking place, and it's happening in a country that doesn't really have that has their own problems. Okay, we have massive economic investment from Chinese businesses which have allegations to organized crime which could not exist without the Chinese Communist Party. We have the Chinese government making major economic investments into the country. When I got off the when I got off the plane, it was the most beautiful airport I've ever seen in my life. It
It's all
was
the
like,
overflow from the investment from the Chinese government,
well, it's the
right?
loans that the Chinese are investing into it. And also, there was a super hot, not a super, the first highway that was ever built went from the capital to this, where the casinos are, all with loans and funded. And that's what China does. China
Right.
gives everybody loans that they know they can't pay back. And then that becomes that. So that's now I'm out there talking to law enforcement. The State Department realizes that this is a problem. There's two FBI agents there that I work with, and now they drop ship me out there, not to do an investigation, but to kind of build bridges and to give these presentations and to talk about the cybercrime problem. And then I get back from there and I'm like completely overwhelmed by what I've seen. And that's why I'm so excited. This is my first podcast. Well, I did one with Darren Mott. And, but that's why I want you guys to really dive into what I've seen so we could really
Yeah, I
try to
really, I
process.
mean, the size of it, the magnitude is unbelievable. And what were you able to learn about the human element of the people that are conducting some of these scams? Because from what I've read, right, again, I haven't gone there, so from what I've read, there are people that are, located various parts around, applying for what they believe is a legitimate job, and they get scooped up into this human trafficking, and they're kind of it's forced labor where they have to do this. And when I say this, I'm not sympathizing with criminals, right? When we
Well,
when,
yeah,
when we look at that, but it is an entire ecosystem that we all have to understand so that we understand their behavior, right?
yeah, no, absolutely. I agreed with that, but I can't process all that. And I see it. I've met so many researchers out there. I mean, there are so many NGOs, there's so many people banging and screaming about the humanitarian issue. And I get it. I get it. Here's the problem that we're starting to see here. The Cambodian government is not as concerned because they're not Cambodian citizens that are
Right.
being trafficked. So what do we have? We have people all over the third world that
Yeah.
aren't making a lot of money who are coming and applying for what they believe are jobs at these specific casinos or whatnot. And there's estimates of 250,000 people that are being brought in. Now, when I was over there, they were doing, yeah, and it's hard to say. I mean, not there. We're a democracy and we have our own problems, but Cambodia has their own problems at the time, and these things are operating in plain sight. And when these places are being raided as scam centers, everyone who's pulling out and running out of the scam centers going, I'm being trafficked. I'm being trafficked. I'm not a bad
Right.
guy. And
Yes.
now nobody has, not to discredit them because this is horrible, but now when you have people who are fleeing the scam centers, they're getting arrested by the Cambodian immigration for overstaying. Their countries don't really care to want them back. Their countries don't have the money to take them
Right.
back. And my humanitarian crisis in this, first and foremost, are the people in the US who've lost all of their money. That's my
Exactly.
humanitarian
Right.
crisis. I mean, no
Right.
discredit to my NGO friends who are spending time. Thank God somebody's doing that. I don't have the bandwidth to really do that. And unfortunately, in my time during the FBI, if I had to get emotionally involved with my thousands of victims, I'd
Right.
be an institution.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Scott, my question here is how much really the government of Cambodia, and actually I know that also Myanmar has several issues the same way, they want to resolve this because if you think about it, that is an income that is coming to the country. That in good or bad way, there is money, somebody's getting rich, and that money also is shared with probably politicians, probably law enforcement, and that's really, really how much they want to stop that.
If I hear you correctly, you're saying that there's a lot of public corruption in every single level of the government. And unfortunately, that exists in every country and it exists at different levels here. Now there is a new prime minister who happened to be the son of the old one. And the father is the head of the Senate, and he said that he's going to clean up a lot of this stuff. But at the same time, talking about it. And the US, the embassy folks there were great because to me, this is all a giant balancing act that is taking place between the US government, Cambodia, and the Chinese all at once. And at the end of the day, I just want to tell you that scams have been going on since the beginning of time. Human trafficking and slavery has been going on since the beginning of time. And this trip reinforced something to me. This is one of the only crises that I can actually play a part in, not solving. I mean, I've taken crap from other people. When I go like this, hey, we're not arresting our way out of the problem. And the NGOs go ballistic at me. They're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, yeah, but I could, if we can get information to all these people, nobody has to fall for a pig butchering scam. Nobody has to fall for a cryptocurrency. But I want to talk about the problem here. That's my tangent. This is my big takeaway. This is what I want to reinforce to the world on my four truths. No one expects to be a victim. The bad guys steal your money. It's not coming back. Okay? Nobody's going to jail. I'm sorry.
Right.
Maybe a couple. They extradited the head of the snake of that Prince group, who was running that big scam. He's back in China. He'll be executed.
I was going to say the arrests have been pretty. They've been covered by a significant amount of media, but there haven't been that many of them. Right, just like we always see. Just like we always see.
They
I
say
have
that
always said, hold on, Sergio. This is, this is my big talking point, and it's one sentence. I have said since I've been with the FBI, we're not going to arrest our way out of this problem. Because when you stamp it out, the best thing in the world is Cambodia is going to push it to Myanmar. Myanmar is going to push it to Bangladesh. We're not stopping these things, okay? I'm sorry, Sergio.
Philippines, yes, no, you are completely right. So this is basically playing whack-a-mole. You hit one and then show up somewhere else. So it's kind of impossible to stop
In 2000, when I was at FBI headquarters in 2005 to 2006, the big problem was Nigerian organized crime.
Correct.
So what did we do with the FBI? We sent a couple of cyber people to work over in Nigeria for a year. They made a couple of arrests. It made the headlines, but so what? And then all of a sudden we started seeing Russian organized crime. So we actually sent people over to Moscow to work with the FSB, to Ukraine, to all the nations there. But today this is different because now we have these guys were very, very loosely affiliated to Nigerians. I mean, they would just go in ad hoc and everything like that until they figured out the business email compromise. Now you have an entire scam center, a living, breathing ecosystem that these guys have put together like a business. And they are going not after companies. They have realized that they can make a lot more money by going after everyone, by doing something as sophisticated as sending a message going, hi, what time are you coming over for dinner? That's it.
Right. And people respond and they start to engage.
You know,
right?
I think I sent this to Dave 2 days ago. I have, in my case, I love to make fun with them. I engage because basically I'm protected and I know how. But I play the role, by example, Indiana Jones or Han Solo. So when they contact me and says, I'm so sorry, I have to transfer, I'm a pilot and I have to fly a princess to a safe place because evil empire is behind her. And they don't have any idea about what I'm talking about. So in that way, I know if they are in China, if they're in Taiwan, in Myanmar, things like that. But also I'm thinking, meanwhile, they are paying attention to me. They are not.
The longer they spend with you, it's one family that's not being bothered.
Yeah, but let me tell you, that's not a good. I did that once just to get into the mindset of this person. And I got them to actually, and this was probably almost 2 years ago, I got them to actually talk to me because I
Right.
was wasting their time for seven
Right.
days. And this person told me that they were being held captive. And they sent me a picture of one of those electronic cattle prongs. And they said if they didn't, and I didn't think anything of it, but now I do.
Yeah.
Now I see that it's hiding right in plain sight. And I was with, and here's the challenge for me. Okay, so I get over there, and as part of my mission with that, and I'll just go through some of my discussions that I had here. And when I got off the plane, when I got there, I talked to the telecommunications ministry, which was a group of local MSPs, just to talk to them about what we see and everything. Then I talked to a bunch of alumni who were police officers who the State Department sent back to the US to get some training. Then I talked to the Cambodian Chamber of Commerce, where I had such a response from young people. They wanted to learn because their financial payment systems are so much more advanced than us. I mean,
Really?
everybody, yeah, it's crazy because
How
everyone,
so? How so?
every,
Like, what do you mean?
everybody, nobody pays in cash there.
Mm,
Every restaurant has a QR code, and you scan the QR code and and you transfer money from your bank account. And
wow.
why is that working? So they don't have to pay the 3% to Visa. And
Right.
everybody does that. Then the next day, I went out to the Cambodian Police Academy and to talk to the recruits there about cybercrime prevention. And then I talked to the Cambodian Chamber, no, the Cambodian Department of Interior, which was the state
Hmm.
police. Now,
Right.
here I am, I'm doing this presentation, and I'm like, they don't want the guy from the United States lecturing them about what Cambodia should be doing or not doing. So I have to really, really,
How
I
did you
can't go in.
handle that? How did you address? How did you pivot?
I explained to them because I explained to them the one thing that I can hook people into my world. I can hook every information security person and I can hook any, and I'm not technical. I go, would your mom fall for that? Would your kids fall for that? So I started explaining that why they could be potentially targeted from them and their families. And if the bad, and I went through my whole social engineering training, my account compromised, dark web. And I knew I really had to pivot because I'm telling one story about the pig butchering scam. And this is my victim who lost $5.2 million. dollars.
Uh,
And all of a sudden, one of the high ranking police officers interrupts me. And this is through a translator and says to me, this confirms what I thought all along. The victims in the United States are greedy. Who would be that stupid to fall for a $5.2 million scam? And I was like, holy.
the victims are greedy. That was their
Well,
And
view.
the
let me also
blame.
tell you something because that's what they're being trained. When I called out that cyber criminal 2 years ago, and we had a long conversation because I told the cyber criminal that they almost tricked me, but if they just would have done a couple of things differently, maybe I would have fell for it. I gave them the hook to open up the
Right.
conversation. And the scammer said to me, I go, do you feel bad about this? And he goes, no. He goes, every one of my victims thinks that they're going to make a gazillion dollars on the cryptocurrency scam.
You know what is the problem there, Scott? Is exactly that. Everybody can fall. Actually, not only Americans. It's the famous story about the woman in Europe that sent almost 1 million euros to Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
That was all over the news. Nothing to do with America. So it's
And and
all everywhere.
in hindsight, you look back and you're like, how could they have fallen for it? But it's slow, and they use a certain methodology where they like love bomb it first, and then they
Oh,
take it
It's a manual
away.
out there.
Yeah, and then
Listen,
they take it
listen,
away,
that's a whole
and then all
nother
of a sudden you
story.
crave it.
Scott, think about it. They are not hacking computers. They are not hacking networks. They are hacking psychology. They are
Hmm.
hacking the person, not the devices.
I've been
Hacking the
saying
code.
that forever. That's why my whole thing is almost 90 to 95% of this stuff can easily be prevented if my end users. So I had to start telling my stories a little bit differently. I had to start coming over and saying things like, how would you, like, this was the, I would use things like this. How would you feel if your mother lost her life savings?
Right.
Or if your dad lost 6 months? And then I went to one, and then I had to do the local police over in Chinookville. And I wanted to scream. I'm like, guys, you're right there. You know,
Right.
Yeah.
and I had to be very, very careful. And I had to ask them, I said, how would you feel if all of a sudden your mom or your dad or your kids lost their entire life savings, everything that they needed to retire, and it was done by some nation in Latin America that the
Right.
Cambodian government doesn't have a relationship with, and there's no way in the world you'd ever get your money back. And I said, and you're cops, what would you do? And they'd
What
be
was
like,
their response? Yeah.
well, we'd call the FBI, and I go, I am the FBI. We can't do anything.
Right. You're not
You
getting your
know,
money back. All of this can be prevented. You go back to the four truths, right? Like, yeah,
And they're going to
and
do it
we
again.
have, yeah,
yeah,
it was just like I came out of there looking at how another population lived. And then I look at all these researchers that are trying to get grants to be able to go do their studies of all this. And I had one NGO call me up and they're like, hey, there's a guy who from Ethiopia that we've been talking to, and he just escaped from the scam center. They took his passport and he has nowhere to go. There's no Ethiopian embassy in there. And I'm like, and I'm talking to the State Department, and they're like, it's not a State Department problem. We're
right.
in too deep. And I can say we could sit here, we can wait for the United Nations to solve these problems, or we
It's
could
not
all,
gonna, that's not
or
gonna
we,
happen.
or
Right. We have to get to individuals. And as Americans, we need to start there and we need to raise awareness and just be aware when you're using technology of any kind, this is coming. It's organized, it's coming. You have to be aware. And that's the whole point, right?
Scott, about the point of the guy, the police guys telling you that American were greedy, let me tell you my personal direct experience with that. Prior to work here in this healthcare industry, I used to work for the Catholic Church of the
Right, the
United States.
Vatican.
I was the Chief Information Services Officer. I worked there, sadly, until the death of the Pope Francis I. But in my time there, I discovered a person that sent $15,000 to one of these scammers. And this priest in Wisconsin didn't send the money because he wanted to become rich or because I want to have more money. He sent the money to the scammer because he thought was going to help him or help her. Was the famous Nigerian princess scam.
Right.
Mhm.
And this is the problem too. Just like you says, I have beside the helping here a day with this podcast. I have a podcast that I create as a result of that for people that I call allergic to technology, which is sadly the main
Everyone.
target of these guys.
Hmm.
Hmm.
These guys are not going for you. They are not going for Dave. They are not going for CISOs. They are not going for people that are into technology. They are going actually for the people that don't care about learning all this, and those are prime
Right.
target for them. If we
Absolutely.
can send this information to them, if we can communicate all this to them, the scammers will have it harder. But that's
Hey,
the
good
thing.
luck. I've been trying to do that since
Yeah.
2004. I can only help those who swim towards me.
That's really where where you really get frustrated, don't you?
Well, and that's why for me, this whole thing has really sparked, has reignited a spark because I'm here to tell you, good luck. You're
Right.
not getting your money back. Good luck with the cryptocurrency. We're going to claw back your money. I love to hear success stories, but I'm not going to be quiet about this. You know what I mean?
Right.
And with everything going on, I mean, we have NGOs that are all fighting for money to do more research, and everyone's screaming it's a humanitarian problem. And I'm like, I hate to not have empathy, but I'm like, look, I'm on this side of the fact. You know what I mean? I got up in one of these conferences one day and said, we're not going to arrest our way out of the problem. And a bunch of prosecutors and law enforcement people looked at me like I'm the guy with the tinfoil hat. I'm like, listen, I started with the FBI. It was 37 years ago. I've learned some lessons. You know,
Yeah.
listen, I get it. We need people to put people in jail.
Well, and I think that, well, one of my questions I had for you was because Cambodia has had a recent crackdown. I've got the numbers and stuff, but the numbers, like the crackdown has been this amount, and the existing size that's still there is 10x, 100x that. Do you think those were really like superficial crackdowns, kind of like we saw with the Russian cybercrime gangs, a few years back, where like they they bust down the doors, they videotape it, it goes all over the internet, and then like 15 others pop up, and now they're
Well,
bigger than they were then, right? It's come on.
I'm going to say, well, because I don't want to discredit my law enforcement partners. I want you to think
No,
about, no,
no.
no, no. And you'll see where I'm going. I want you to think about when the DEA does a 3-year investigation and they take down 200 organized crime members around the United States and they've done nothing more and they put these bad guys in jail. They're celebrating, which the rightfully so, with the prosecutors like, look, but in the grand scheme of life, did it really
No,
do anything?
no.
So I'm
Right.
saying, like, I
Yes,
remember
exactly.
I was asked to be part of an interview. There was a guy by the name of Hush Puppy who was a Nigerian organized crime figure who was arrested in Abu Dhabi and he was charged by the Southern District of New York and the FBI. And these guys worked their asses off and they did a great job. And they came to me and they said, look, you don't sound really excited. And I'm like, listen, I'm glad that this guy's in jail, but nobody's getting their money back.
Right. The focus has to be on the actual victims. Focus has to be on raising awareness and educating people, whether they're tech savvy or not tech savvy, right? Because
But how
the
do you
non-tech
educate it?
savvies, the yeah,
You educate people who don't want to be educated, who don't think there's a problem.
yeah. Well, you entertain them, you make them laugh, you use sarcasm.
Well,
We make it like Netflix. Like that's my theory.
yes.
Like we make it at least enjoyable to watch people become idiots in front of smart people because I've mastered that skill. Like we just ask questions that non-technical people will ask, right? Like why does this matter? Like what do we do? Well, it matters because these people that are calling you, right? If you don't think they're persistent and they're good at their job, they have cattle prods to their necks and are working 16-hour days in forced labor. That's why they're so good at it, right? So if you're not up and your guard isn't up, right, they're going to get you. And
And your
that's the
guard's
scary
always
thing,
going to be down, and you
right?
can't be up you can't be up
And now they
24/7.
have
Right.
a new tool
Right.
called AI.
But we didn't even
Well,
go into
yeah,
that. I mean, listen, I've been working, and this is where my idea is coming for my next book. And
I'm
is
looking forward to
really
that one.
Yeah, I know. I just got to get my crap together to do it, and it's all now.
Gotta
And I'm going to
stop
be
traveling, man.
well, no, and I'm going to be the first guy in the world who's going to say, "Listen, I had AI write my entire book because I put my old book into AI, and now I just dictate and I just say write it in the same style." But
Right.
here's the whole premise, and I just want to walk you through this in 1 minute to see what you think. Since I retired, the problem has gotten completely out of control. And I retired, it was like 8 years ago. And here we are so far down the road that I hate to say it, in 8 years from now, the problem's going to continue to get worse. I'd reinforce the four truths, which is you're not getting your money back, nobody's going to jail, but it could have been prevented. And then really focus on the third truth, why aren't people going to jail? And really the eye opening experience from Cambodia. And then talk about, but this is it. I mean, I think I boiled it down into 5 steps. You have to understand social engineering, and social engineering just is not emails anymore. Tricking
Right.
people into doing something they normally wouldn't do. And I have broken that down into 10 categories. And unfortunately, in those 10 categories, there's probably 20 scams in each category. How do you package that and put that together? And then explain that you have to realize that your password's already on the dark web. So if you're
Right.
not using two-factor authentication, you are a goner. It's that
Right.
simple. And even if you put two-factor authentication on all your mission critical accounts, your family hasn't, your friends haven't, and you're still going to get
Exactly.
a text message. So that's what I'm trying to turn together. And I really think if I had 3 good days, I can get this book out.
Yeah.
What
Like,
we can do to help you?
yeah. What can we do to help you? Well, we're building apps in Claude every day. Sergio has taught me how. I've got a app that is doing my entire podcast workflow. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Well, after we can all sit down, because that's really, like me going on this, and I'm like,
I think this is great. This is great insight to really see. Is there anything I haven't asked you about this trip? Let me ask you that, because like you must have heard so many anecdotal stories or things about what these scam centers like. How do they operate inside? Are they a, you sent me the photos and I'll have these up on the screen that show all the buildings. I mean, they're beautiful buildings. It looks like it's downtown Manhattan.
yeah,
Like it
but
looks
some,
fantastic.
some, if you look at some of them, I did a video, and you see that the back of the buildings on some of them are facing the street. You know,
Really
Yeah, so that's the kind of, and they go around city blocks. So the backs of the building face the street. So there are no door.
interesting. There's no
Yeah.
doors. There's no grand entrances.
No, but
Scott,
everything's guarded in a compound type setting. So what I sent you were actual casinos. Now, I read a little bit about the amnesty reports. I heard some stuff on victimizations there. But it's really like, I don't know, how do I go about it? How do I educate? I'm sure everyone in the State Department's very happy that I went out there, I educated people, but is it
Well,
really
and let's
enough?
think about what the message is. Like, okay, they're enforced labor, but is the message to Americans we have to feel sorry for these people? Well, when we speak to them and the interviews I've seen of the actual scammers, they don't have empathy or sympathy for the Americans and the elderly that they're scamming either,
I
I
think
think
right?
there's a
it's part
number
of.
of crises going on at the same time,
Yeah.
and you have to pick your area that you want to focus on. That's it.
Yeah, that's a good way of
And one
saying it.
last thing, I just don't think we can empathize as much. And I hate to say this because, for Sergio and Dave, your family, what's the chances of someone in your family applying for a job in a Southeast Asian country and being held
Right.
against
And
their
Yeah,
will?
getting,
pretty low.
yeah,
Zero. But what's the
pretty
chances of
low.
them getting ripped off in a scam of some sort? That's
Very
high.
Very
high,
high.
which is our bias, right? That is our that is our bias, right? That is why we report on these same facts the way we report on them. Whereas if I was younger and more noble and I was working for Amnesty International and going out there, I would be taking and exploring and, putting the spotlight on the victims that are in the forced
Yeah,
labor camp.
and then pick your humanitarian crisis
Right.
going on around the world. And I don't
Yeah.
mean to limit that, but it's like I just remember like my grandmother would say, "I'm not watching the news because I don't want to hear about the murders. The murders make me feel bad in New York City." And now it's like I mean, I got people in Cuba, I got people in Israel, I got people in Gaza, we got people in the
I know.
Ukraine, we got
Everywhere.
Sudan, we got it everywhere. And it's like, and then we got people protesting about the penguins or,
I
the
know.
stray cats. And I don't want to minimize that, but there's
Too
just so
much.
what.
The
That's
poor
why the only
penguins. The poor penguins. Let's talk about penguins for a second because they are like dressed up for a nice night out and like they got
they're
nowhere to
getting eaten by
go.
the sea lions.
I know. I mean,
Now that you are saying that is a video, a completely separate theme, but it's a video in the internet about this group of Russian soldiers in Ukraine that a drone is taking the video and look like as a penguin in the middle of these soldiers. Another thing that happened is they have this new uniform that suppose drones don't identify the soldier. But
they
when
think
the
it's a
guy
penguin.
then yes, when the guy sit down from the top looks like a penguin. And of course the
Really?
the drone identified the rest of the soldiers and you just sadly you see yeah, it's
But save the
close.
penguin. But save the penguin guy.
No, the penguin is
The
not.
penguin guy.
But the penguin looks like one of those guys in the stadiums animating the people.
Okay.
So he's laughing, but also he's so sad that being
That's
human
really
being.
sad.
But Scott, how much do you think also the big problem is here for these scammers that Americans we are look like we are the evil people? Like, hey, it's okay to scam them because they are the bad guys. You understand? That's one thing. And they grow up with that idea. Chinese, Russian, a lot of those people happen
Yeah, I
that. So
think
that's
from a young age they're taught. They're
yeah.
Well,
they're they're
that's my second part of my trip, and we'll do that on another podcast because after I left Cambodia, I got on a plane. I went to Vietnam for a layover, and then I got off in Jakarta, which is a city of 40 million people, where I did a project for ASEAN, which is the group of 11 Asian nations. And in those nations, there was a conference with 70 young people funded by the State Department and for a group called YSILI, the Young Southeast Asian International Leadership. I know they're going to get mad because I forgot what it stood for, but we in the US government are investing a lot of money in future leaders. And that's what I was there to do. I was there
that's
as a
good.
mentor, I was a keynote. And now I'm still, if you look at my LinkedIn, I'm still staying in touch with 70 young people that are the future because that's what the US government is investing in, is trying to make sure, and I hate to say it, that the Chinese don't get that the Chinese don't build the same program to do
Right.
the influence. Now, no matter what's going on in the United States, these kids are going to be loyal to the US government. And I met with people from the Philippines, Indonesia, Burma,
It's so
Vietnam,
important though. It's
Laos.
so important. And yes, it's influence and we have our own, our own agenda there, but it is still key for them to understand our way of life and our value of freedom.
Yeah, yeah, that's a whole nother topic on its own.
Yeah,
And these are the programs that the State Department is doing that I'm starting to take part of as part of their
that's good.
speaker program, is they want to start bringing me out to do these types of events in other countries because while I was out there, I was educating people on the cyber secure mindset.
Right.
And that's
Exactly.
just something else that I took back, and we built leadership programs and cybersecurity awareness for them to take back to their countries. So that's a whole nother
great.
podcast. It was
Of course.
just a really amazing thing.
That's fantastic. Well, Scott, thank you so much. Retired FBI agent Scott Augenbaum. Dr. Sergio, thank you so much.
Before we got, Scott, have you
Yeah,
seen
sure.
a movie called The Beekeeper that supposes the representation of these scam centers is how close they are to reality?
First of all, the thing that I didn't get a chance to actually see firsthand was the inside. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. I'm going to be completely transparent here. I heard presentations. I've done that. So I don't even know, like when we start seeing these scam centers, we're seeing rows and rows of computers. They're being boiled down, not boiled down, but they're being put on display where you see the banks of phones. They don't really look like they're really nice places. I don't think anyone's really investing in marble things. And here's the last thing. I mean, it could go on. Scam centers do cost money. I mean, let's just say this. I mean, let's say you got
Electricity.
50 people in a scam center. You need beds, you need water. Even if you need rice, you got to pay for rice. You need air conditioning if you're going to have computers, right?
Right.
They cost money. With the
Electricity.
use of artificial intelligence, are you going to be able to create a virtual scam center?
Right.
Think
It's
about
probable.
that. Absolutely.
Well, Scott, let me tell you very fast too. Coming from Mexico, 30 years now living in America, full citizen. But I hear my friends there also in the law enforcement that a lot of drug dealers are switching or expanding to
into
cyber
crypto
scams
and into
because
cybercrime.
exactly for the same thing that you said, Scott. Having, by example,
Absolutely.
operation for make drugs, you need the raw material. You have to have the people that knows how to do it. You have to have the place. You have to have a
And the
transportation way.
penalties too. I
Yes,
saw an interview with one of the like Crips and Bloods guys
yeah.
talking, and he's like, "Look, I could do this." He was doing carding, right? He
Mhm.
was doing, the generating of the fake credit cards, and he's like, worst case scenario, if I get caught, it's 10 years in a federal prison as opposed to mandatory minimums for dealing heroin and ecstasy and stuff like that. And I'm like,
And that's why
well,
the
that's
federal government has put together these RICO statutes to have predicated criminal offenses to try to capture those in, because and it was designed for organized crime. Because remember, organized crime was running legitimate businesses, and
exactly
then they just started getting into all these other vices that really weren't that big of a deal, like gambling
right.
and prostitution and the
Right.
rackets.
They were
And then
deemed victimless, really, right?
yeah, so it's just putting that together and forming it. But I think today with the use of artificial intelligence, I mean, think about what you guys can play with on Claude on saying what do you need that would be able to build a virtual scam center.
I'm not going to do that, by the way,
Yes.
if anybody's watching. I'm not going to do that. I'm just trying to deal with my workflow and the podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Just
listen, I
want to
get it.
speed that up.
Yeah.
Come on,
Everything
you
we
got
says
plenty of
here
free
can be
time.
used against us, and we have a FBI agent.
Yes.
Retired.
Yeah. No.
Retired, not former, retired.
Yeah,
Retired. Friend, still having friends over there, so
Yeah, it's
Quantico is
still
still
good.
an option.
That's
listen,
good.
all my friends are retiring, so I'm getting to the point now where I've been retired 8 years ago. So
Yeah.
the big
Well,
thing
thank
here,
you
and I
so
want to
much,
hold
man.
on, I want to leave everyone on this one thing. We talked about some really dark stuff today. We talked about some really scary stuff, but there's steps we all can take to stay safe.
Yeah.
And for any of your listeners who will send me an email, I will give them the audio copy of my book, The Secret to Cybersecurity, as an Easter egg, just for tuning in this far.
I appreciate that.
Thank
And
you.
we will have your email right there in the show notes, and I encourage everybody to do it. I'm telling you, always enjoy speaking with you. And what I like is it is very practical. It's very understandable, and there are concrete steps everybody can take. And that is really
Simple.
the key. It is. It really is fighting crime just via technology. And so I think the industry overcomplicates it because they want to. You know what I mean? Because they
Hmm.
want a lot of acronyms so they can charge more money. But in
Of course.
general, yeah. I mean, but in general, a lot of this is human nature and knowing just the practical elements. Things like multi-factor authentication, like you talked about.
It's that simple.
All
Start
those
with the base.
things. Start with the basics. So many people don't do the basics. So
Some people don't do nothing.
I know. So, well, gentlemen, thank